Folks, welcome in to Talkin' Soccer. I am your host, Justin Horniker, and I've been up for a long time as the U.S. played Sweden at 4 o'clock in the morning here in KC. And drank a lot of coffee, got ready for what I was nervous about. I was nervous about this game since I woke up yesterday. And kind of dreading the roster drop, dreading what this game may look like. And, by the time the game rolls around, it's a bit of a gamble with the roster. Emily Sonnet playing her first, real memorable minutes in this World Cup, playing next to Andy Sullivan in a double pivot with Lindsey Horan pushing forward. And ultimately, for as weird as it was to get your head around at the start of this match, it played out well. This was a good formation gamble from Vlatko Andonovski, and it looked pretty strong. Trinity Rodman made a lot of noise, generated a lot of chances through her first 60 minutes. She was on a minutes restriction because she got sick in camp, but that's okay because Lynn Williams comes on. Then Lynn Williams is effective, and it ends 0-0 at full time. The U.S. had 10 shots on goal in regular time to 1 Sweden shot on goal in regular time. And that's not to say that the U.S. necessarily, dominated this game, but they had definitely a majority of the chances. They had a lot of control in the game. You can't say you dominate a game when you don't get a goal, but it was just running into the brick wall of a goalkeeper and also not taking your chances well. There's a lot of that. I don't know. It's hard to wrap your head around, given that. So it gets to stoppage. It gets to extra time. Megan Rapinoe comes in for Alex Morgan. Sophia Smith is going to move centrally. That's a change that should have happened before you even got to extra time. Then no subs are made again until we are getting ready for penalty kicks, when Christy Mewis comes in, when Kelly O'Hara comes in, and it's not as if those are bad subs, but making 4 subs when you had an extra in extra time, also making 4 subs throughout those 120 minutes, 2 of them being generally worthless outside of their ability to take penalties, which Christy Mewis crushed her penalty, so that one pays off in a way. But when you add that substitution strategy in a game where, you desperately needed to move forward, this is your first knockout match in this World Cup, in a game where you actually looked better, if they go out like this, looking this way through the group stage, it's a bit more of a kind of wondering why this happened. But to go out this way after 2.5 years of getting the formation wrong, after the lead up to the World Cup, when everyone was kind of sounding the alarm bells, it's because if you follow this team closely, if you watched every match, if you're, following, I was there watching their games at the She Believes Cup, talking to them after the matches, and you hear what Vlatko says in his post-match analysis, and sometimes just the things he says just don't make any sense. And then you see how it plays out in the match, and, while the players have always said that Vlatko is a great manager and that they want him to be around, and obviously he was probably the perfect guy to be there after Jill Ellis, it's catastrophic to go out with this talent pool, with this much skill in your roster, to just catastrophically explode in the round of 16. And that's not to say that Sweden isn't a good team, but you get into this mess because you get your formation wrong. As you see in this match, it's the second that they are able to go to the double pivot, that they're able to more evenly distribute their space, they're not running into each other all the time, they have a much more successful game going forward, and they didn't sacrifice anything defensively, which was maybe the one point you could make through the group stage is that, yeah, they weren't very good going forward, I guess. They weren't very clinical going forward is probably the better word for that. But defensively, they were sound. They only allowed one shot on goal through the group stage. One goal through the group stage, I should say. 3 shots on goal. In this match, they only allowed 1 shot on goal through full time. They were over 250 minutes. Still, I guess, 253 minutes of not allowing a goal against. Alyssa Nair, doing everything she can to keep them in it. And it's all for naught. So what does that defensive stature do if at the end of the day, you can't score? And it would be one thing if you weren't sure if this, attack could do this at all, right? If Sophia Smith was just like some player who was still kind of coming up, Trinity Rodman was still some player who was kind of coming up, and Alex Morgan at the end of her career at this point. But no, Sophia Smith has been scoring almost over a goal and a half goal and assist contribution per match in the NWSL this year. She's on a better scoring rate than she was last year when she won the MVP. That's the player that you have who you're playing out wide when she is clearly successful, essentially. It's just, if you look up and down this lineup, you're having players that are playing out of position, players that are playing away from their best position. You're not trusting in your bench when you should have one of the deeper benches in the world. And Vlatko could lean on the fact that there were injury issues, of course. You're losing 3 nailed-on starters and some bench talent with Katerina Macario, Mal Swanson, Becky Sauerbrunn. Like, those are the big names off the top of your head. Sam Ewis, of course, as well. Like, those are 4 players that are some of the best players in the world. So you could hang your hat on that, I guess, and that you do the best you can with the players you have. But the roster that they have is still should be the best team in the world. There is just no excuse. There's no excuse. Someone asked me this on Twitter about if it's more that the rest of the world is catching up, if the US have something to be worried about, or if it's just the coach being bad. And it's both, but you don't know in the past if coach's tactics throughout the entirety of the U.S. women's national team program. You don't know if some of these coaches were, bad necessarily with their tactics, right? Like, you can make that argument for sure that the U.S. got by with athleticism over the course of the entire program. But when you get to a point where a manager is continuously setting this team up in a way that's not successful, and the rest of the world is catching up in the meantime, now, if you go into a match that you just got completely wrong and the spacing is off, opposing teams are going to take advantage of that more than ever before, because even like the Zambias of the world are starting to catch up and are starting to, have tactical personalities and are starting to, play a more cohesive brand of soccer. And if you watch the women's game all over the world, you're going to see that. You're going to see more cohesive play. And when that goes to the national team, it means that, these teams that are at the top of the game, at the top of the FIFA rankings, aren't going to be able to just skirt by with the same old tactical tendencies over and over and over again. You have to evolve as the game evolves around you. And when you look at what Vlatko did or didn't do, I guess, over the course of this program, over the course of this cycle, and especially in the last year and a half, you wonder if the pressure of going for a three-peat, if the pressure of having all of these riches at your disposal almost was too much. Like, it's hard to say, because Vlatko wasn't necessarily a terrible coach at the NWSL level. He almost devolved over the course of his U.S. Women's National Team tenure. Now, that's not to say that Vlatko is for sure out, but This is the first time the U.S. women's national team has not at least finished in third place at a World Cup. Bowing out in the round of 16, that is by far the worst performance in any competition for the U.S. women's national team, outside of Rio. Rio was disappointing in its own right, but this almost feels worse in that respect, in that you have these players at the height of their capabilities. If you look at the NWSL, if you look at Sophia Smith, you look at Crystal Dunn, what she has been doing in the midfield for Portland and can't even get a look in the midfield for the U.S., then you become over-reliant on Roosevelt on mince restriction, and then picks up the yellow card. So now that she's out, you're playing in a formation that you haven't done ever until this point. I'm rambling, I'm going on, but I think all those superlatives are necessary. It's a program that's never been in this position before. So do you maybe kind of take that as almost looking on the bright side of okay, now they can wipe the slate clean, they can start a new cycle with the young players that have been so successful, and the young players coming up behind them too, who are just as good. You have a great generation of players coming up, the Alyssa Thompsons, the Jaden Shaws, the Alyssa Montrez. They are just going to get better and better. And I think the U.S. is in good hands going forward. They just had to figure out, again, what is their tactical personality going forward. And you have to hope that U.S. Soccer can make the right call on manager of this squad, which I also don't have a lot of faith in. And, you don't have, you're not left with a lot of positives going forward. I watched that penalty shootout today, just waiting for the shoe to drop. And it's just kind of been the feeling around this team all year, looking back on it, that there's just something missing. There's something missing in all of their warm-up games, all their tune-up games. I mean, you look back to kind of their foray into Europe last year when they had the matches against Spain, England, and Germany that they lost. It never felt like they really learned from that. And the lessons that they did learn, it seems like Flacco almost went back on those lessons in the end. It's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow. So that's where we will leave it. For now, that is the end of the U.S. World Cup run. Sweden move on. I had to figure out how to get my sleep schedule back on track. But in the meantime, let me know what you thought down in the comments. If you think that Vlatko should stay as the coach of the U.S. Women's National Team, let me know who you would like to see manage this team going forward, and what you would have done differently in this game or in the World Cup in general. If this is your first time talking soccer, not every video is going to be this doom and gloom. They're usually a lot more upbeat than that, so make sure that you hit that subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if you commiserate with my misery here today. And folks, get some sleep. We'll talk soon.